My beloved child, your soulmate wants a secret meeting to see you, but there is something hidden underneath that desire, and once you understand it, you may finally realize why this person has been acting so differently lately. They have imagined seeing you more times than they would ever admit. Not through a screen. Not through a memory. Not through another person telling them how you are doing. They want to stand in front of you and see what happens when there are no messages to hide behind, no distance to protect them, and no easy way to pretend that their heart is unaffected. But here is the part you were never expecting: their heart may already be far more emotionally invested than their actions have shown. They can look calm while carrying a storm of thoughts about you. They can disappear for a while and still wonder whether you noticed. They can act as though they have moved on while secretly replaying moments between you, especially the moments that ended without saying everything that needed to be said. And that is why this meeting feels different. It is not simply about seeing your face. It is about seeing your reaction. They want to know whether the connection they still feel exists on your side too. They want one moment where they can read your eyes instead of reading a message. They want to hear your voice without having the safety of a screen between you. And there is one question sitting quietly inside them that they have not been brave enough to ask directly: if I came back into your life, would there still be a place for me? That question is the real reason this secret meeting matters. Because somewhere along the way, they realized that avoiding the truth did not make the feeling disappear. It only made the feeling harder to understand. They may have told themselves that time would make everything simpler, but time only gave them more opportunities to remember you. And now something inside them is changing. The person who once thought they could control the distance may be realizing that distance never gave them the peace they expected. The silence did not erase you. It made them notice your absence. And just when you thought their silence meant they had forgotten, another layer begins to appear. Your soulmate may not want this meeting to be dramatic at all. In fact, they may be imagining something incredibly simple: sitting somewhere quiet, looking at you, talking normally, and waiting for that one moment when the conversation becomes honest. They may start with ordinary words because ordinary words feel safer. How have you been? What have you been doing? You look different. But underneath those harmless sentences could be everything they have been unable to say. They could be studying the smallest details: whether you still smile the same way, whether your voice changes when they mention the past, whether you seem relieved to see them, whether you look nervous, or whether you look completely unaffected. That last possibility may be what unsettles them most. Because there is a strange truth about someone who still cares: sometimes they are not afraid that you will reject them, they are afraid that you no longer need them. They wonder whether you have grown beyond the version of yourself they once knew. They wonder whether someone else now receives the attention they once hoped would belong to them. They wonder if the door they left open too long has quietly closed. And this is where the secret becomes emotional. Their heart may already be choosing you internally, even while their mind keeps demanding reasons to wait. Their heart remembers what felt real. Their mind remembers what went wrong. Their heart remembers your presence. Their mind remembers the uncertainty. Their heart says, go see them. Their mind says, what if it changes everything? And somewhere between those two voices, they have been stuck. That is why you may have felt a strange inconsistency from them: warm one moment, distant the next, curious, then quiet, almost ready to approach, then suddenly holding themselves back. It is not necessarily because they do not know what they feel. Sometimes the hardest thing is knowing exactly what you feel and realizing that admitting it could change the entire relationship. They may be carrying a confession they have not yet given a name to. They may not even know how to explain it without exposing how deeply you have remained in their thoughts. But listen closely, because the most unexpected part is still ahead. The meeting they imagine may not be about convincing you to love them. It may be about discovering whether they still have the courage to be honest with you. That is a completely different kind of meeting. They are not simply wondering, will they accept me? They may also be wondering, can I finally tell them what I should have said before? And that question can keep someone awake longer than any romantic fantasy. They may remember the exact moment they held something back. They may remember a conversation where they wanted to say more but chose the safer answer. They may remember seeing you walk away while pretending that everything was fine. Perhaps there was a moment when they could have reached out, but pride, confusion, timing, or uncertainty made them hesitate. And now, looking back, they may realize that silence has its own consequences. The things we do not say do not always disappear. Sometimes they become the sentences we rehearse privately again and again. This is why their secret meeting may have a completely different purpose than you imagine. They may want to tell you what was happening inside them during the time they seemed distant. They may want you to understand that certain actions did not tell the whole story. They may want to explain why they pulled back, why they waited, why they watched from a distance instead of approaching, and why they seem to know more about your life than you expected. But there is something they are especially nervous about: your reaction when they finally reveal the truth. Because once something is spoken aloud, it cannot be hidden behind ambiguity anymore. They cannot simply say, "I was confused." They may have to admit that they cared. They may have to admit that your absence affected them. They may have to admit that even while pretending to move forward, part of them kept wondering whether your paths would cross again. And if you meet them with calmness instead of anger, that could completely disarm them. They may have prepared themselves for rejection, but not for the possibility that you might simply look at them and say, "I always wondered what you were really feeling." That sentence alone could open a conversation they have been postponing for far too long. There is one final detail you need to hold on to, because it changes the entire meaning of this story. Their heart may already have made a decision that their words have not caught up with. They may still be analyzing everything, still searching for the perfect moment, still wondering how to approach you without making themselves vulnerable, but emotionally, something has already shifted. The idea of losing the possibility of you may feel heavier now than the fear of admitting they still care. And that is why the secret meeting keeps appearing in their imagination. They are not only picturing your face. They are picturing the moment after the truth comes out. They are imagining what happens when the excuses disappear and both of you finally stop pretending that the connection meant nothing. Maybe they imagine you asking one question they cannot escape: why did you wait so long? And they already know that answer may not be easy. Because sometimes a person waits not because they do not care, but because caring makes them afraid of making the wrong move. Sometimes they wait because they want certainty before they risk their heart. Sometimes they wait because they believe they missed their chance. And sometimes they wait until the thought of never knowing becomes more painful than the fear of finding out. Your soulmate may be standing close to that point now. The meeting may begin quietly, almost casually, but the emotional weight underneath it could be enormous. And if they finally look at you and stop hiding behind carefully chosen words, you may hear something that explains far more than their silence ever could. Because the secret they have been protecting may not be about another person, another plan, or another chapter. It may be about you, and about how their heart never completely finished the conversation it started with you. But there is still one thing they have not decided: whether they will reveal everything they feel when they finally see you face to face, or whether they will look into your eyes, realize how much is still there, and become even more honest than they planned to be. The moment they finally imagine standing in front of you, everything they rehearsed in their mind may suddenly disappear. They have probably created an entire conversation privately. How they would greet you, what they would say first, what they would avoid, and exactly how they would keep their emotions under control. But they may not realize that the second they see you, the plan could become irrelevant. Because there is something about seeing someone in person that memories cannot reproduce. Your expression, your voice, your energy, the way you look at them after everything that happened. And that is precisely what your soulmate may secretly want to discover. They want to know whether the connection still feels different when there is no distance between you. They may have wondered whether what they feel is simply nostalgia, but a face-to-face meeting could answer that question in seconds. And perhaps that is what makes them hesitate. Because if they see you and those feelings return stronger than before, they will no longer be able to tell themselves that the past is completely behind them. They may have spent weeks or months trying to organize their emotions into something logical, but your presence could expose everything they carefully kept hidden. Imagine them sitting across from you, pretending to be completely normal while internally noticing every little detail. They may wonder whether you can sense their nervousness. They may wonder whether you are watching them as closely as they are watching you. And then comes the question they fear most. What if you look completely different emotionally? What if you have become stronger, calmer, more independent, and less willing to accept uncertainty? That possibility may be forcing them to confront something they never expected. They may not simply be afraid of losing you, they may be afraid that you have already learned how to live without them. And if they discover that, the meeting could become the moment when they finally understand the value of what they once took for granted. Something else has been quietly bothering them, and this may explain why the meeting feels so secretive. They do not want outside opinions controlling what happens between you. They may feel that too many people, too many assumptions, or too many conversations have already influenced the connection. They want a moment where it is just you and them, without anyone interpreting every word. Because when other people become involved, emotions can become distorted. A simple message becomes a story. A delay becomes a conclusion. A quiet period becomes an assumption. Your soulmate may now want to remove all of that noise and discover the truth directly from you. They want to hear what you actually think, not what someone else believes you think. And this is where their hidden intention becomes much more emotional than romantic. They may want to understand whether you ever felt the same depth that they felt. They may want to know whether certain moments mattered to you as much as they mattered to them. They may want to ask about something that happened between you that they never fully understood. Perhaps they remember a particular look you gave them, a sentence you said, a goodbye that felt strangely unfinished, or a moment when both of you seemed to understand something without saying it. They may have replayed that moment privately, asking themselves what it meant. And now they want the answer from you. Not from assumptions. Not from memories. From you. That is why this meeting could become more meaningful than either person expects. It might begin with small talk, but beneath every ordinary sentence could be one enormous question. Was I imagining what existed between us, or did you feel it too? If they finally ask that, notice what it means. They are not asking for a fantasy. They are asking for clarity. They are exposing the one uncertainty that has stayed with them longer than they wanted to admit. And now comes the part they may never tell anyone. They may already know what they would say if you gave them one completely honest moment. They might tell you that they tried to move forward. They might tell you they convinced themselves that staying quiet was easier. They might tell you they expected the memories to become weaker with time. But instead, certain things kept bringing you back into their thoughts. A song. A place. A familiar phrase. A random moment during an ordinary day. Something small would suddenly remind them of you, and for a few seconds they would feel the same emotional pull they thought they had outgrown. They may have wondered why this kept happening. Why you? Why now? Why does the memory still feel unfinished? And perhaps the answer is not that they have been unable to move forward, but that their heart never received the closure their mind kept pretending it had. There is a difference between forgetting someone and accepting what happened between you. They may have achieved the first temporarily, but never the second. That is why the idea of meeting you privately feels so powerful. They want to replace assumptions with reality. They want to know whether the connection has genuinely ended or whether there is still something worth understanding. And if you are wondering why they have not simply said all of this already, the answer may be hidden in one uncomfortable truth: vulnerability changes the balance between two people. The moment they admit they still care, they lose the protection of pretending they do not. Suddenly you have information they cannot take back. Suddenly you know that they thought about you. Suddenly you know that their silence did not mean emptiness. And perhaps they are terrified that once you know the truth, you will have the power to decide what happens next. Yet despite that fear, the desire to see you may be becoming stronger than their desire to remain protected. So if the secret meeting happens, do not expect the biggest revelation to arrive in the first few minutes. It may come after the conversation has settled, after the nervousness fades, after they realize you are actually listening. There may be a long pause where neither of you knows what to say next. And that pause could matter more than 100 prepared sentences. Because eventually, one of you may ask the question that changes everything. Why did you really want to see me? That question could leave them completely exposed. They may look away. They may breathe deeply. They may smile nervously because they suddenly realize that there is no clever answer anymore. Then they may finally say something simple, something that sounds almost too ordinary for the emotional weight behind it, because I needed to see you for myself. And that sentence could carry everything they have been unable to explain. They needed to know whether the feeling was real. They needed to know whether your presence would still affect them. They needed to know whether you had completely moved on. They needed to know whether there was still a conversation waiting between you. And perhaps most importantly, they needed to know whether their heart had been holding onto something that both of you were still capable of understanding. The meeting may not give them the perfect ending they imagined. It may give them something much more valuable: truth. And once that truth is finally sitting between you, there may be one confession left that your soulmate has been avoiding because it could completely change how you interpret everything that happened before. They have not just been wondering whether you still care. They have been wondering whether you would choose to hear the one thing they were never brave enough to say when they had the chance. The secret they have been carrying is not getting smaller. It is becoming harder for them to hide, because your soulmate may have reached the point where simply imagining you is no longer enough. They want to see the person behind all those memories, and more importantly, they want to see what happens inside themselves when you are standing right there. They may have imagined this meeting countless times, but there is one detail they cannot predict: your eyes. They can prepare sentences, choose the perfect location, rehearse how calm they will appear, but they cannot prepare for the moment your eyes meet theirs. And that may be exactly why they want the meeting to remain private. They do not want an audience when the truth begins to surface. They do not want anyone watching their expression if you say something unexpected. They do not want another person noticing the silence that may follow a simple question. They want one moment where neither of you has to perform. Because somewhere inside them, they know there are feelings that cannot be properly explained through messages. There is a difference between typing, "I miss talking to you," and actually sitting across from someone you have missed. There is a difference between remembering someone's smile and suddenly seeing that smile again. There is a difference between believing you have moved on and discovering that one look from the person you once cared about can still awaken everything you thought you had organized. Your soulmate may secretly be afraid of that difference. They may be afraid that seeing you will prove something they have been trying not to admit: their heart is not as detached as their behavior suggests. And perhaps you have noticed the contradiction already. Maybe their actions sometimes seem distant, but there are moments when their attention feels strangely present. Maybe they disappear, then somehow find a reason to return. Maybe they act casual while remembering details about you that someone who truly stopped caring would probably have forgotten. These contradictions can create confusion, but underneath them there may be a person fighting an internal battle between what feels safe and what feels honest. Their mind may say, "Keep your distance." Their heart may quietly answer, "But what if this person is still important?" And the closer they get to arranging that meeting, the harder it becomes to ignore that question. There is another reason they may be searching for a private moment with you, and it has almost nothing to do with romance at first. They may want to understand the version of you that exists today. They know the person they remember, but they do not fully know the person you have become. And that uncertainty can be surprisingly powerful. They may wonder whether you still think about the past, whether you have forgiven what happened, whether you would even recognize the person they are now. Perhaps they have changed too. Maybe they have learned things about themselves since you last shared a meaningful moment. Maybe they understand now why certain conversations failed. Maybe they recognize that they were emotionally unavailable when you needed clarity.